In a world where filters and facades dominate our digital and personal lives, the idea of what makes a person unforgettable has evolved. Society constantly pushes the notion that perfection, flawlessness in appearance, behavior, and achievement be key to standing out. However, this obsession with perfection often leads us to lose sight of the most powerful trait we can possess: authenticity. True magnetism lies not in the polished version of ourselves we try to project, but in the raw, unfiltered expression of who we truly are. Carl Jung, the famed Swiss psychiatrist, offered a profound truth when he said, "What you desire isn't perfection, but authenticity." In a world that celebrates the curated self, this idea feels like a paradox. How can imperfection be the foundation of something unforgettable? And yet, it is precisely this contradiction that forms the essence of what it means to leave a lasting impression on others. The key to being unforgettable isn't to present an idealized, flawless version of yourself, but to embrace your true, authentic self, including all the misanthropes and imperfections that come with it. Throughout history, philosophers have contemplated the idea of authenticity. The ancient Greek philosopher Socrates emphasized the importance of self-examination, famously stating, "An unexamined life is not worth living." In this light, authenticity doesn't mean conforming to the expectations of others or seeking validation from external sources. It means knowing yourself, accepting your flaws, and living in a way that aligns with your deepest values. It is through this inner alignment that true influence and unforgettable presence emerge. Similarly, Aristotle spoke of self-knowledge as the root of all wisdom. He understood that the pursuit of perfection often leads to disconnection, a detachment from the true self in favor of a constructed ideal. The pursuit of perfection in external accomplishments, relationships, or appearance often creates a gap between who we truly are and the version we present to the world. This gap not only prevents us from experiencing genuine connection, but also keeps us from becoming the most impactful version of ourselves. In this exploration, we will uncover the 7 paradoxes of an unforgettable person. These paradoxes show that what we've been taught to suppress, our vulnerability, our emotional depth, our imperfections, are the very qualities that make us magnetic. By embracing these paradoxes, we can stop striving for a perfection that keeps us bound and start embracing the authenticity that sets us free. Part I. The paradox of authenticity. In the pursuit of becoming unforgettable, we often find ourselves caught in the tension between the image we project to the world and the authentic self lurking beneath the surface. This tension is at the heart of the paradox of authenticity. The very traits that society tells us to hide or suppress, the ones that are often deemed imperfect or inadequate, are the traits that make us truly unforgettable. There is an inherent contradiction in this idea. While perfectionism is celebrated, it is our imperfections and realness that have the most lasting impact. The paradox of authenticity lies in the fact that, as humans, we are drawn to what feels real, not what looks flawless. Our most profound connections are often made not when we present a polished version of ourselves, but when we allow our rawness to be seen. This can be seen in our relationships, in the people we admire, and even in our moments of vulnerability. The act of showing up fully as ourselves, with all our flaws and imperfections, is what draws others in. Yet paradoxically, society urges us to conceal those very parts of ourselves in favor of an idealized image. It is this contradiction that creates the fertile ground for personal growth and genuine human connection. To understand the paradox of authenticity, we must first understand what it means to be authentic. Philosophers have long explored the nature of the authentic self. Socrates, often regarded as the father of Western philosophy, famously declared, "Know thyself." This ancient call to self-knowledge is the foundation of authenticity. For Socrates, The process of truly knowing oneself was not just about intellectual understanding, but about aligning one's actions with one's deepest truths. To be authentic, he argued, was to live in accordance with one's true nature and values, not the expectations or judgments of others. It was a call to reject societal norms that might steer us away from our true self and to courageously stand in the power of our individuality. Socrates' wisdom resonates today as we navigate a world that continuously pushes us to conform. The modern-day pressures to present a filtered, idealized version of ourselves can distance us from our true identity. And yet, we are continuously drawn to those individuals who break free from these constraints. They are the ones who, in the midst of societal noise, embrace their true selves unapologetically. It is this authenticity, this willingness to be vulnerable, flawed, and real that makes them unforgettable. Carl Jung's concept of individuation provides further insight into the paradox of authenticity. Individuation, according to Jung, is the process of integrating all parts of oneself, including the aspects that we might find uncomfortable or undesirable. It is not a process of striving for perfection, but of embracing the totality of who we are, our strengths, our weaknesses, our contradictions, and our shadows. Jung believed that it is through this integration of our hidden or rejected aspects that we become whole. Wholeness, he argued, is far more compelling than perfection. To live authentically is to accept ourselves fully, even the parts we might wish to hide, for it is in these parts that our true power lies. The act of embracing our authentic selves often involves confronting the aspects of ourselves that we have long been taught to suppress. These may include our vulnerabilities, our emotional intensity, or our fears. Western society, with its emphasis on achievement and image, often encourages us to hide these qualities in favor of a more polished, controlled exterior. But in doing so, we lose touch with what makes us truly powerful. The paradox is that by trying to hide our imperfections, we inadvertently diminish the very qualities that make us memorable and influential. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche offers a compelling perspective on this paradox. Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch, or overman, is not about striving for an unattainable ideal of perfection, but about embracing one's individuality and cultivating one's unique qualities without concern for external judgment. Nietzsche encourages us to become who you are, a powerful call to embrace the self as it is, rather than as we think it should be. It is through this acceptance of the self complete with all its imperfections that we find our most authentic expression. Nietzsche's idea also aligns with Jung's concept of the shadow. The shadow refers to the unconscious parts of ourselves that we suppress. They do not align with the image we wish to project. These suppressed qualities, however, hold great power. Jung believed that by acknowledging and integrating the shadow, we are able to tap into a deeper well of creativity, strength, and authenticity. In rejecting our shadow, we reject a crucial part of ourselves, and in doing so, we diminish our ability to make a lasting impact. That an unforgettable person, then, is one who no longer hides their shadow. They embrace their flaws, uncertainties, and contradictions, knowing that it is in these very aspects that their true strength lies. The paradox is that in accepting our imperfections, we become more magnetic. It is when we stop trying to be perfect and allow ourselves to be fully human, messy, complex, and real that we become unforgettable. This paradox also plays out in our relationships. We often believe that to be loved, we must present a perfect version of ourselves. We hide our insecurities, flaws, and vulnerabilities in an attempt to meet the expectations of others. But true love, as many great thinkers have argued, is not built on perfection. It is built on acceptance, understanding, and authenticity. As the philosopher Alain de Botton notes, We are drawn to others, not because they are perfect, but because they allow us to see that our own flaws are acceptable. In embracing our own imperfections, we invite others to do the same. It is this shared vulnerability, this willingness to be real, that creates the deepest, most lasting connections. In sum, the paradox of authenticity is this: perfection will never make us unforgettable, but our willingness to embrace and express our true, unfiltered selves will. The traits we've been taught to hide, our vulnerabilities, our emotional depth, our imperfections, are not weaknesses, but sources of power. By allowing ourselves to show up authentically, we free ourselves from the tyranny of perfection and unlock the potential to leave a profound, lasting impact on the world and those around us. It is in the paradox of being real that we find the key to becoming truly unforgettable. Part 2. The power of quiet. Strength in a world where louder voices and more dramatic displays often seem to dominate, there is a quiet but undeniable power in stillness, in presence. This quiet strength is one of the most paradoxical qualities of unforgettable people. It isn't about being the loudest or most attention-grabbing, but about being so firmly rooted in one's own identity that others feel your presence even in your absence. It is the kind of strength that doesn't need to announce itself, but instead, it quietly exudes confidence, calm, and authenticity. This strength is not the boisterous, extroverted kind that demands the spotlight. Rather, it is the strength of inner peace, a stillness that others are drawn to because it signals an individual who has mastered their own emotional world. This quiet power is what the Stoics understood as a vital component of a life well lived, and it is this concept that we will explore further. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters." This is the essence of quiet strength, our ability to maintain composure, wisdom, and grace in the face of adversity, and to act from a place of inner balance rather than external circumstances. True strength does not lie in reaction or force. It lies in resilience and the ability to remain anchored in one's true self despite the turbulence of life. Quiet strength is the product of self-mastery. It is the recognition that we cannot control the world around us, but we can control how we respond to it. In a culture that often values outward achievement, flashy successes, and external validation, quiet strength can seem undervalued or misunderstood. However, it is precisely this kind of strength that gives people lasting influence. It isn't the person who needs to constantly seek attention who makes an impact. It's the one who, by virtue of their presence, leaves an impression long after they have left the room. One of the greatest examples of this quiet strength comes from Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher. He was a ruler who faced wars, political intrigue, and personal loss, yet he maintained an unwavering commitment to personal virtue and wisdom. In his meditations, Marcus Aurelius often reflects on the importance of remaining true to one's character, even in the midst of chaos. His writings reveal an individual who was not concerned with how he appeared to others, but rather with how he could cultivate a life of integrity, wisdom, and inner peace. For Marcus, true strength was not in dominance or external power, but in the ability to stay grounded in the face of external pressures. This quiet strength is also echoed in the teachings of Epictetus. Epictetus was born a slave, and he endured hardship and suffering throughout his life. Yet he remained steadfast in his commitment to Stoic philosophy. His wisdom on how to live with quiet strength emphasizes the idea that we cannot control external events, but we can control our internal responses. In his discourses, Epictetus writes, "Freedom is the only possession of which you cannot be robbed." He believed that true freedom came from mastering one's inner world and not being enslaved by external circumstances. It is in this self-mastery that one cultivates quiet strength. This type of strength is often misunderstood in a world that rewards outward displays of power and success. We are often led to believe that loudness equals confidence, that dominance is a sign of strength. However, the paradox lies in the fact that the most powerful people are often those who are least interested in dominating others. Instead, they hold a steady, calm presence that draws others in. Their strength is not measured by how much they talk or how loudly they assert themselves, but by their ability to remain unmoved by external validation or disapproval. Quiet strength also involves the courage to remain true to oneself in a world that constantly pushes us to conform. It is the person who is secure enough in their own identity that they do not feel the need to perform or pretend for others. This quiet confidence is magnetic precisely because it is not about impressing others, but about being authentically present in any situation. The most unforgettable people are often those who make others feel seen and heard, simply by being comfortable in their own skin. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard explored a similar theme in his work, stressing the importance of individuality and authenticity. He warned against the pressure of societal norms and the temptation to conform in order to gain acceptance. Kierkegaard believed that true strength and authenticity came from embracing one's individuality, even when it meant standing alone. It is through this authenticity that one's quiet strength is revealed to the world. Quiet strength also manifests in the way we handle emotional challenges. It is easy to be reactive, to lash out or seek validation when we feel threatened or insecure. But true strength lies in the ability to respond with wisdom, grace, and restraint. Emotional intelligence, being able to understand and manage our emotions, is a key component of this quiet strength. The Stoics taught that we should not be ruled by our emotions, but rather that we should understand them, reflect on them, and use them as tools for growth. Epictetus, for example, argued that our emotions are not inherently bad, but rather that they are signals that we must interpret and respond to with wisdom. In the face of difficulties, quiet strength is the ability to acknowledge pain and discomfort without allowing it to define us. It is the strength to endure hardship with dignity, to face failure without self-pity, and to rise again without bitterness. The power of quiet strength lies not in avoiding challenges, but in meeting them with a steady heart and a clear mind. The paradox of quiet strength is that it often goes unnoticed by those who are fixated on louder displays of power. It is the strength that does not demand attention, but instead commands respect through its subtle, unshakable presence. It is the person who, without uttering a word, conveys a sense of inner peace and resolve. It is the kind of strength that inspires others, not through force, but through its very essence. In a world obsessed with external validation, the ability to cultivate quiet strength is one of the most profound and impactful qualities we can develop. It is through this quiet power that we are able to live authentically, to stay grounded in our values, and to make a lasting impact on the world around us. When we embrace this strength, we are not only more resilient, but we also become more magnetic, leaving an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of others, even when we are no longer in the room. Part 3. Owning your truth in a world where the pursuit of approval and validation often takes precedence. The act of owning your truth becomes a radical and transformative act. To live authentically, it is necessary to be honest with yourself and the world, to stop performing roles for the sake of others' expectations, and to embrace the full spectrum of who you are: flaws, vulnerabilities, contradictions, and all. Owning your truth is not just about acknowledging your authentic self. It is about standing in that truth with confidence and integrity, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it challenges societal norms. At the heart of this journey lies the performance trap that many people fall into, a trap that often leads to the loss of personal connection and self-awareness. Most of us have been conditioned to perform in our daily lives, to adapt ourselves to the roles and personas that others expect of us. We become chameleons, constantly adjusting our colors to fit in, to gain approval, or to avoid judgment. This performance is often unconscious, shaped by years of societal conditioning, family expectations, and peer pressure. We wear masks, constructing images of ourselves that are pleasing to others, but which obscure our true nature. Yet, as the philosopher Søren Kierkegaard so insightfully pointed out, the most common form of despair is not being who you are. To perform an image, to live according to the expectations of others rather than one's own authentic desires, is a form of existential despair. It is a state of self-alienation, a disconnection from one's true self. Over time, this disconnect becomes more pronounced. The more we pretend to be something we are not, the further we drift from the person we were meant to be. Eventually, the performance becomes exhausting, and we find ourselves questioning who we really are beneath the masks. The danger of losing yourself in this performance is that you become so consumed by the need for external validation that you forget how to connect with your own inner truth. As the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche argued, we must become who we are. This is not a call to self-improvement in the superficial sense, but a call to strip away the layers of pretense and self-deception. To own your truth is to accept yourself fully, to no longer hide behind the images you have created, and to stop seeking validation from sources outside yourself. This is a deeply courageous act, one that requires confronting the parts of yourself you may have long ignored or rejected. One of the most important components of owning your truth is the wisdom of knowing yourself. As Aristotle famously said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. It is impossible to live authentically if you are not in touch with your own desires, values, and beliefs. Yet many of us go through life without ever truly examining who we are. We define ourselves by our jobs, our relationships, or the roles we play, rather than by the deeper truths that reside within us. This lack of self-awareness leads to a life that is shaped more by external influences than by internal direction. One of the most important components of owning your truth is the wisdom of knowing yourself. As Aristotle famously said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. It is impossible to live authentically if you are not in touch with your own desires, values, and beliefs. Yet, many of us go through life without ever truly examining who we are. We define ourselves by our jobs, our relationships, or the roles we play, rather than by the deeper truths that reside within us. This lack of self-awareness leads to a life that is shaped more by external influences than by internal direction. The philosopher Socrates, too, emphasized the importance of self-knowledge. His famous dictum, "Know thyself," was not a mere call for intellectual understanding, but a challenge to live in accordance with one's true nature. For Socrates, the examined life was the only life worth living. The more we examine ourselves, our thoughts, actions, desires, and motivations, the more we can align ourselves with our authentic truth. Without this introspection, we risk living a life dictated by the expectations and judgments of others. Owning your truth begins with this examination, asking yourself who you are beyond the labels and roles imposed by society. Yet the process of knowing and owning your truth is not always easy. It requires vulnerability, the willingness to look at parts of yourself that may be uncomfortable or painful. The philosopher Carl Jung speaks extensively about the shadow aspects of the self, those parts of ourselves that we reject, deny, or project onto others. To truly own your truth, you must acknowledge these aspects and integrate them into your sense of self. Jung believed that our shadow is not something to be feared or avoided, but rather something to be embraced. By accepting our shadow, we accept the fullness of who we are. This concept of owning all parts of ourselves aligns with the work of existentialists like Jean-Paul Sartre, who emphasized that we must take full responsibility for creating ourselves. For Sartre, existence precedes essence. In other words, we are not born with a predetermined nature or purpose. Rather, we must create ourselves through our choices and actions. To own your truth is to take full responsibility for the life you are creating, without hiding behind excuses or justifications. It is to recognize that while you cannot control all the circumstances of your life, you have the power to define who you are in relation to those circumstances. However, the journey of owning your truth is not just about introspection and self-knowledge. It is also about action. The philosopher Simone de Beauvoir wrote, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." This idea of becoming is not limited to gender identity. It applies to all aspects of who we are. To own your truth is not a passive state. It requires actively shaping your life in alignment with your authentic self. This means making choices that reflect your true values and desires, even when they contradict societal expectations or personal fears. Owning your truth also involves the courage to face the discomfort that comes with it. It is not easy to stand in your truth when the world is pushing you in different directions. It is uncomfortable to challenge the roles that others have assigned you, to step away from the scripts you have been taught to follow. But as the Stoics understood, discomfort is often the birthplace of growth. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, writes, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The very obstacles we face in owning our truth, whether they are external pressures or internal fears, are often the tools we need to deepen our understanding of ourselves and to cultivate the strength necessary to live authentically. The final danger of losing yourself in the performance trap is that approval from others, once earned, can quickly become unsatisfying. As we continue to perform and seek validation, we eventually realize that approval is a poor substitute for self-acceptance. The applause of others fades, but the connection to our true self is lasting and unshakable. When we finally stop seeking approval and begin owning our truth, we experience a profound sense of freedom. This is the freedom that comes from no longer needing to be anything other than who we are. To own your truth is to take back your power. It is to stop letting the expectations of others shape your life and to begin living in alignment with the deepest part of yourself. By doing so, you not only find greater peace and fulfillment, but also become unforgettable. Because the truth you carry, unmasked and unapologetic, is magnetic. It invites others to step into their own truth as well. And it is in this space of authenticity that lasting connections are formed and true influence is born. Part 4. The process of individuation. The journey toward becoming an unforgettable person is not about chasing perfection or crafting a flawless image for the world to see. It is, instead, a deeply personal and transformative journey of becoming whole, of integrating all the disparate parts of the self that we often suppress or hide in an effort to conform to societal expectations. This process, known as individuation, was conceptualized by Carl Jung, who believed that true self-actualization is the path to wholeness. Individuation is the process of becoming the fullest version of yourself by embracing all aspects of your identity, including those parts you may find uncomfortable or unworthy. Through this process, you do not merely add more achievements, accolades, or traits to your repertoire, but rather you strip away the false identities that prevent you from being truly authentic. Jung believed that individuation was the core of psychological health. He argued that in our early lives, we form certain identities or personas in response to societal norms, familial expectations, and external pressures. These personas help us navigate the world, but they often obscure our true nature. The challenge, then, is not to reject these aspects of ourselves, but to integrate them into a more coherent, authentic sense of self. The goal of individuation is to harmonize the conscious and unconscious parts of the psyche, to accept and embrace the totality of who we are, both the light and the shadow. Individuation is the process of owning your truth in a more profound sense. It is about stepping into the fullness of your own identity, accepting the contradictions, complexities, and imperfections that come with being human. This journey is often long and challenging, but it is through this process of integration that we become more real and, paradoxically, more unforgettable. For the person who has undergone individuation, there is an undeniable magnetism. Others are drawn to them because they exude authenticity, confidence, and a deep sense of inner peace. The key to understanding individuation lies in the idea of the self, according to Jung. The self, in Jungian psychology, is the totality of the psyche, encompassing both the conscious and unconscious realms. It is the true, whole self, but it is often obscured by the personas we create to survive in a world. The process of individuation is, therefore, the journey toward realizing and embodying the self. It involves breaking free from the limitations of the persona and integrating the unconscious aspects of the psyche, including the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we often reject or deny. Jung's concept of the shadow is essential to the individuation process. The shadow consists of all the parts of the self that we hide or suppress because they are deemed socially unacceptable, weak, or undesirable. The shadow includes our fears, insecurities, anger, and desires, but it also contains the untapped potential within us. Far from being something to repress, Jung believed that integrating the shadow was a vital part of becoming whole. The shadow represents the unacknowledged parts of ourselves that, when embraced, can bring a deeper sense of balance and understanding. Through this integration, we no longer need to hide parts of ourselves out of fear or shame, and we can move forward with greater self-acceptance and clarity. The paradox of individuation is that it involves embracing the parts of ourselves that we have been taught to hide. Society often values traits like perfection, stability, and conformity, but individuation requires us to accept our mésalliances, contradictions, and complexities. True strength, according to Jung, lies in this acceptance of the whole self, not in pretending to be something we are not. It is through this process that we find freedom and personal power. The unforgettable person is one who has undergone this process of self-acceptance and is able to walk through life with an unshakable sense of who they are. This idea of embracing wholeness resonates with other philosophical traditions as well. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, for instance, spoke of the importance of self-knowledge and the pursuit of virtue as part of achieving eudaimonia, or flourishing. In his Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle argued that living a virtuous life required understanding and accepting oneself, including the aspects of oneself that might be difficult to confront. Aristotle's concept of virtue was not about attaining an ideal of perfection, but about finding balance and harmony within oneself. To become your fullest self, you must first confront your flaws, desires, and vulnerabilities, and then work to integrate them into a life of balance. The process of individuation also echoes existential philosophy, particularly the work of Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre's concept of bad faith refers to the tendency to live inauthentically, to conform to external pressures, and adopt false identities. Bad faith is the denial of one's true self in favor of an imposed role or mask. Sartre believed that existential freedom comes from confronting this bad faith and embracing the responsibility to define oneself. Individuation is, in a sense, a process of rejecting bad faith and embracing the freedom to live authentically. Key part of individuation is recognizing that we are not fixed or static beings. We are constantly evolving, growing, and integrating new aspects of ourselves. This dynamic process of becoming is essential to understanding the full depth of who we are. The philosopher Heraclitus famously said, "You cannot step into the same river twice," emphasizing the ever-changing nature of life and identity. Individuation requires us to accept that we are always in a state of becoming, that we are constantly refining ourselves and becoming more in tune with our true nature. This process involves not just personal growth, but also deep self-reflection and inner work. This journey of becoming is not always easy. It can involve painful moments of self-confrontation, times when we must face the parts of ourselves that we have long denied. Yet, it is through these confrontations that we gain a deeper understanding of who we are and what we are capable of. As the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche noted, "That which does not kill us makes us stronger." It is in embracing the challenges and contradictions of life that we come to embody a fuller version of ourselves. In the context of being unforgettable, the process of individuation offers a profound insight. The people who leave a lasting impression are not the ones who strive for perfection or conform to societal expectations, but those who embrace their full humanity, flaws, vulnerabilities, and all. They are the ones who are unafraid to be real, to be whole, to integrate all parts of themselves into a coherent sense of self. These individuals do not merely imitate the world around them, but create their own path, embodying authenticity and wholeness. It is this authenticity, this embrace of self-knowledge and self-acceptance, that makes them unforgettable. Thus, the process of individuation is not about becoming someone else or achieving an unattainable ideal. It is about embracing who you truly are, and in doing so, becoming the most powerful and unforgettable version of yourself. This is the paradox at the heart of individuation. By accepting and integrating all parts of yourself, you transcend the limitations of your former self and become more than you could have ever imagined. The journey toward wholeness is the journey toward true freedom, and it is this freedom that makes you unforgettable to those who encounter your true, unmasked self. Part 5. The paradox of being vulnerable. Vulnerability is often seen as a weakness in our culture, an opening for harm and rejection. To be vulnerable is to expose yourself, your emotions, your fears, your insecurities to the world, and in doing so, you risk judgment, criticism, and even abandonment. Yet, in the grand paradox of personal growth and the human experience, vulnerability is not a weakness, but a source of profound strength. The people who leave a lasting impression on us are often the ones who have the courage to reveal their true selves, imperfections, and all. Their vulnerability is not a sign of fragility, but of authenticity, bravery, and emotional depth. In embracing vulnerability, they invite others to connect with them in a real, unguarded way, creating bonds that are far stronger and more meaningful than those built on pretense or perfection. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard understood this importance of vulnerability in his existential writings, which emphasized the necessity of embracing the uncertainty and anxiety inherent in human life. Kierkegaard argued that to live authentically is to confront the existential anxiety of being what he called dread, and to acknowledge the full scope of our freedom and responsibility. To be vulnerable, in Kierkegaard's view, is to embrace the fact that we are finite beings, aware of our limitations, our uncertainties, and our capacity for failure. In the face of this dread, vulnerability becomes an act of courage, a decision to live authentically despite the fear of judgment or rejection. This existential perspective on vulnerability is echoed in the work of modern psychologists, particularly Brené Brown, who has become renowned for her research on the power of vulnerability. Brown's work challenges the conventional belief that vulnerability is a weakness, arguing instead that it is the birthplace of creativity, courage, and meaningful connection. Brown writes, "Vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome." In this sense, vulnerability is not about exposing oneself to failure, but about being willing to take emotional risks, to expose the raw, unpolished parts of ourselves without knowing how others will respond. That is precisely this willingness to expose our unguarded selves that creates the conditions for deep human connection. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we make it possible for others to do the same. We move beyond the superficialities that so often define modern relationships, and we begin to experience the emotional depth that makes us truly human. The paradox is that by showing our weaknesses, our imperfections, and our pain, we create the conditions for the strongest, most enduring relationships. The ability to be vulnerable is, therefore, a paradoxical strength. It requires courage and emotional intelligence, and it is the key to building lasting, authentic connections with others. Socrates, too, understood the importance of vulnerability in his call to self-examination and the pursuit of wisdom. In the Apology, Socrates famously claims that the unexamined life is not worth living. For Socrates, the act of self-examination was not just an intellectual exercise, it was an emotional one as well. To examine one's life authentically is to confront the discomfort of uncertainty, to acknowledge one's flaws and contradictions, and to remain open to the possibility of change. This process of self-examination is inherently vulnerable, as it requires the individual to question long-held beliefs, to confront uncomfortable truths, and to expose oneself emotionally to the realities of existence. Yet, it is through this vulnerability that true wisdom and personal growth emerge. The Stoics, too, saw vulnerability as essential to living a meaningful life. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, often reflects on the importance of accepting the inherent vulnerability of human existence. He writes, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." For Marcus, acknowledging one's vulnerability, the inevitability of suffering, loss, and imperfection, does not make life weaker, but more meaningful. Vulnerability becomes a source of strength because it teaches resilience and the ability to act in alignment with one's values, regardless of external circumstances. The Stoics understood that the path to true inner peace and strength lay in accepting our vulnerabilities and responding to them with equanimity and wisdom, rather than resistance or avoidance. The paradox of vulnerability extends into the realm of emotional intelligence. Emotional depth, when approached with wisdom, is one of the most powerful and compelling aspects of being human. Society often tells us to suppress our emotions, to keep them hidden from the world in the name of strength and control. But true emotional intelligence is not about suppressing emotions. It is about understanding, processing, and expressing them in healthy ways. When we allow ourselves to feel deeply and express our emotions authentically, we are demonstrating the courage to confront and manage our internal world. This is the essence of emotional depth, not the avoidance of discomfort, but the capacity to experience and express our feelings fully and without shame. Emotional depth is also a key aspect of being truly unforgettable. The people who leave a lasting impression on us are not the ones who present the facade of perfect control or detachment. They are the ones who allow themselves to feel deeply, to experience the full range of human emotions, and to share those emotions honestly with others. This emotional openness creates a sense of vulnerability that others can connect with, even if it is unspoken. It is this authenticity, this willingness to engage with the emotional complexity of life, that makes people magnetic and unforgettable. As Nietzsche pointed out, embracing vulnerability is an essential aspect of the human condition. In his work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche famously wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." This idea, while often interpreted in terms of overcoming adversity, also speaks to the transformative power of vulnerability. To be vulnerable is to expose oneself to potential harm, but it is also to open oneself to the possibility of growth and self-discovery. Each time we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, whether in love and friendship or in self-expression, we risk failure and rejection, but we also create the conditions for personal transformation and deeper connection. The paradox of vulnerability is that by exposing our weaknesses, we gain strength. It is through vulnerability that we build resilience, emotional depth, and connection. The people who are unforgettable are often those who have mastered the art of being vulnerable. They are unafraid to reveal their true selves, and in doing so, they invite others to do the same. In a world that often values perfection, emotional detachment, and self-protection, vulnerability becomes a rare and powerful gift, a source of strength that allows us to connect more deeply with others, to live more authentically, and to leave a lasting impression on the world around us. In conclusion, the paradox of vulnerability is that it is both a source of potential harm and an essential key to human connection, growth, and personal power. Embracing vulnerability requires courage and wisdom, and it is through this embrace that we unlock the deepest, most authentic versions of ourselves. When we allow ourselves to be truly vulnerable, we give others permission to do the same, creating bonds of connection that transcend superficiality and leave a profound, lasting impact. Part 6. Emotional depth as power. In a society that often encourages emotional suppression in favor of stoic detachment or rational control, the true power of emotional depth is an overlooked but profoundly transformative force. While many might equate emotional expression with weakness, the ability to understand, embrace, and navigate our emotions with wisdom is an essential quality of unforgettable people. Emotional depth is the gateway to true emotional intelligence, the rare ability to perceive and engage with feelings, not just our own, but others as well, on a deep and authentic level. The paradox of emotional depth as power lies in the fact that those who can feel the most deeply are often the ones who are able to handle their emotions with the greatest composure and insight, making them truly magnetic. Philosophers have long grappled with the nature of emotions and their role in the human experience. The ancient Stoics, for instance, believed that emotions like fear, anger, and desire could cloud rational thinking and lead to harmful behaviors. They advocated for the suppression of unchecked emotions and the pursuit of tranquility through reason. Yet, their approach was not about the outright denial of emotions, but rather the mastery over them, developing the ability to respond to them thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. For the Stoics, wisdom lay not in avoiding emotions, but in regulating and transforming them, allowing them to be powerful tools for growth rather than obstacles to peace. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, provides an example of this discipline in Meditations, where he reflects on the importance of controlling his responses to external events. He writes, "It is not the events themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." This insight reflects the Stoic belief that while we cannot control what happens to us, we can control how we respond. The ability to handle emotions with wisdom and perspective is a form of power, one that is not rooted in avoidance or repression, but in the conscious and mindful engagement with our inner states. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche also highlighted the importance of emotional engagement, though in a somewhat different context. Nietzsche's philosophy calls for embracing the full spectrum of human experience, including the raw intensity of emotion. He famously declared, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." Nietzsche saw value in confronting and experiencing powerful emotions like rage, sorrow, and passion. He understood that, in their rawest forms, These emotions could serve as a springboard for personal transformation, creativity, and growth. Emotional depth, for Nietzsche, was not something to be feared or avoided, but something to be harnessed in the pursuit of individual greatness. Emotions, when expressed and understood authentically, fuel our most creative and meaningful endeavors. This idea is also mirrored in modern psychology, where emotional intelligence is seen as a critical factor for success and personal fulfillment. Emotional intelligence, as coined by psychologist Daniel Goleman, is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, as well as the emotions of others. Unlike traditional notions of intelligence, which focus on cognitive ability, emotional intelligence emphasizes the importance of empathy, self-awareness, and emotional regulation. Emotional depth, in this sense, becomes a form of power, not because it makes us immune to difficult emotions, but because it allows us to engage with those emotions in a constructive and purposeful way. Having emotional depth means feeling emotions without being controlled by them. It involves having the insight to understand why we feel the way we do, and the wisdom to decide how to express those emotions in a way that is aligned with our values. It is about knowing when to lean into our emotions and when to step back and reflect. The power of emotional depth is not in the suppression of emotions, but in the ability to channel them thoughtfully and productively. In this way, emotional depth becomes a source of strength and resilience. This type of emotional intelligence also plays a key role in interpersonal relationships. People who are emotionally deep and attuned to their own feelings can better understand and empathize with the emotions of others. As the philosopher Martin Buber pointed out, true connection happens when we meet others in their vulnerability and authenticity. In his work, I and Thou, Buber emphasized that relationships are built on mutual understanding and the recognition of the other person as a whole, authentic being. Those who possess emotional depth are able to engage in these authentic exchanges, creating connections that are grounded in empathy and emotional honesty. When we approach emotions with depth, we open ourselves to greater personal growth and connection with others. To be emotionally deep is to be willing to experience life in its fullest form, to embrace joy and pain alike, and to allow those experiences to shape us rather than define us. This emotional openness requires courage, the courage to confront difficult feelings and the courage to express them without fear of judgment or rejection. This is where the paradox lies. By embracing our emotions fully and expressing them with depth and understanding, we empower ourselves to create lasting, authentic relationships and to leave a profound impact on others. In a world that often emphasizes surface-level interactions, people who cultivate emotional depth stand out precisely because they are unafraid to be emotionally vulnerable. Their authenticity in expressing emotion resonates with others on a deeper level, fostering trust and connection. These individuals are unforgettable, not because they hide their feelings, but because they express them with wisdom, humility, and sincerity. Emotional depth allows them to transcend superficial exchanges and engage with others in a more meaningful, powerful way. The ability to harness emotional depth as power does not mean allowing ourselves to be overwhelmed by our emotions, but rather embracing them as a source of insight and strength. By acknowledging and accepting the full range of our emotional experiences, we cultivate a resilience that allows us to navigate life's challenges with grace and purpose. Emotional depth is a quiet yet potent form of power. It gives us the ability to stay true to ourselves, to connect with others on a profound level, and to move through life with an open heart, unafraid of what emotions may come. This is the power of emotional depth. It makes us more human, more connected, and more unforgettable. Part 7. The paradox of love and relationships. Love is often portrayed as the ultimate goal, the most profound connection we can experience. Yet, it is also one of the most complex and paradoxical aspects of the human condition. In the pursuit of love, we are encouraged to seek out validation, completeness, and connection through another person. We often measure love by how much we need or how much we are needed. But true love, the kind that forms lasting bonds and leaves an indelible impression, does not arise from neediness or dependence. Instead, it comes from a place of wholeness, from the ability to choose love freely and authentically, without relying on another person to complete us. The paradox of love in this context is that the most powerful and fulfilling relationships are often those that do not emerge from a place of need, but from a place of fullness and self-sufficiency. It is only when we are whole within ourselves, when we have embraced our true self and made peace with our vulnerabilities, that we can enter into relationships that are not based on the desire to fix ourselves or another person. The key to genuine, transformative love lies in this paradox. True love is a choice made from a place of personal wholeness, not from the necessity of validation or survival. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who often explored the complexities of human relationships, touches on this idea in his writing. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche speaks of the will to power, which can be understood not as dominance over others, but as the desire to transcend one's limitations and become one's truest self. For Nietzsche, love is not about seeking someone else to fill an emotional void or to make us complete. It is about finding another person with whom we can share a journey of mutual growth and self-transcendence. Love, in Nietzsche's eyes, becomes a form of self-affirmation, an act of choosing to be in a relationship, not because we need another person to complete us, but because we recognize the beauty and potential for growth in each other's authenticity. Philosophy challenges the conventional idea of love, which often emphasizes dependency and the need to find someone who can make us feel validated. According to Nietzsche, true love arises from a recognition of the other's individuality, a deep respect for their personal journey, and a shared desire to grow together. Love, when rooted in this freedom and mutual respect, becomes a powerful force that transcends the typical roles of giver and taker, and instead creates a partnership built on equality, choice, and respect. The concept of love as a choice rather than a need is also reflected in the ideas of the philosopher and psychologist Erich Fromm. In his seminal work, The Art of Loving, Fromm suggests that love is an art, a practice that requires maturity, self-awareness, and a willingness to invest in the growth of another. Fromm posits that love is not a spontaneous or passive emotion, but an active decision to engage with another person in a way that fosters mutual growth and fulfillment. This type of love is not about clinging to another person for fear of being incomplete. Rather, it is about sharing your completeness with someone else. When we are whole and self-accepting, we can love without the desperation of needing to be validated or saved. In this context, the paradox of love becomes clear. The more we strive for love from a place of need or dependency, the more elusive it becomes. Love, when it comes from a place of wholeness, feels expansive rather than constrictive. It is no longer about trying to fix ourselves or another person, but about creating an environment where both partners can flourish and become more authentically themselves. This paradoxical dynamic is what makes love not only transformative, but also unforgettable. True love is not about the comfort of dependence, but the freedom of mutual, wholehearted connection. Carl Jung, whose work focused heavily on the integration of the self, also speaks to this paradox in his writings on relationships. Jung's concept of the anima and animus represents the unconscious feminine and masculine aspects within each of us. He believed that in order to form healthy, meaningful relationships, we must first come to terms with these aspects within ourselves, integrating both the masculine and feminine sides of our psyche. Only then can we enter into relationships as whole individuals, not as halves seeking completion. Jung saw the process of individuation, becoming whole by embracing all aspects of the self, as essential for forming relationships that are grounded in mutual respect and authenticity. Jung's view of love challenges the popular notion of romantic relationships as a means of finding the one who completes us. Instead, he proposed that love, in its highest form, is about two whole people coming together, not to fulfill unmet needs, but to share in the experience of life, growth, and mutual discovery. Love then becomes a choice, a conscious decision, to share life with someone because you are already complete in yourself, and you see the value in deepening your connection with another complete person. The paradox of love is also evident in how we navigate the challenge of letting go in relationships. As we enter into relationships from a place of wholeness, we must also recognize the importance of boundaries and the courage to let go when necessary. This is not an act of rejection or abandonment, but of self-respect and self-care. True love requires the strength to let go of relationships that no longer serve us, that drain our energy, or that do not respect our authenticity. In this sense, love is not about clinging to others out of fear or need, but about allowing each person the freedom to grow, even if that means parting ways. In The Road Less Traveled, psychiatrist M. Scott Peck discusses the concept of love as a commitment, a conscious choice to act in the best interest of another, even when it is difficult or uncomfortable. Peck suggests that real love is not an emotion, but a decision, one that requires self-discipline, effort, and a willingness to accept both the joys and challenges of connection. This is a powerful paradox. True love does not stem from the rush of infatuation or the search for validation. It arises from the decision to be present, committed, and authentic in a relationship, even through the inevitable struggles. In conclusion, the paradox of love and relationships is that the most profound, lasting, and transformative love arises from a place of wholeness and self-sufficiency, not from the need for validation or the desire to be completed by another. True love is a choice, not an act of desperation. It is the recognition that we can only love others fully when we love ourselves completely, and that love is not about possession, dependence, or control, but about mutual growth, freedom, and respect. By embracing this paradox, we become capable of experiencing a love that is not only unforgettable, but also deeply fulfilling, as it is grounded in authenticity, choice, and the shared journey of becoming whole together. Part 8. The Paradox of Boundaries. Boundaries are often misunderstood in both personal relationships and in broader social contexts. We tend to think of boundaries as barriers, walls that separate us from others or restrict our freedom. But the paradox of boundaries is that, far from being limitations, they are essential to our well-being and personal growth. In truth, boundaries are not walls that keep people out. Rather, they are filters that allow the right people in and keep the wrong ones out. Boundaries are not about creating distance or isolation. They are about creating space where we can honor ourselves, our needs, and our values, while allowing others to do the same. The philosopher Immanuel Kant, whose work on ethics and autonomy remains foundational to contemporary thought, emphasized the importance of self-respect and the moral imperative to treat others as ends in themselves, not merely as means to an end. In his view, boundaries are a reflection of self-respect, a way of honoring one's own dignity and humanity, while simultaneously recognizing and respecting the humanity of others. Boundaries are not about control or rejection. They are about maintaining integrity and autonomy within relationships. When we set clear boundaries, we communicate to others that we value ourselves and our time, just as we respect their need for space and independence. In the context of personal relationships, boundaries are often confused with selfishness or coldness. Many of us fear that setting boundaries will push people away or make us seem distant or unkind. But the truth is that without boundaries, relationships can become codependent, unbalanced, and unhealthy. By failing to establish clear limits, we allow others to infringe upon our time, energy, and emotional resources, ultimately leading to resentment, burnout, and dissatisfaction. The paradox here is that in order to nurture healthy, loving relationships, we must be willing to say no at times, to draw the line, and to protect our own well-being. The ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, whose work on ethics and virtue has influenced much of Western philosophy, offers valuable insights into the role of boundaries in a flourishing life. Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia, state of flourishing, or well-being, rests on the idea of living in accordance with virtue, which requires finding balance in all areas of life. Part of this balance involves setting boundaries that allow us to cultivate healthy relationships, manage our emotional energy, and prioritize our well-being. Aristotle understood true happiness comes not from the unrestricted pursuit of pleasure or success, but from living a life rooted in self-control, self-respect, and thoughtful engagement with others. In this sense, boundaries are not obstacles to happiness. They are tools for creating the conditions in which we can thrive. In relationships, boundaries are not about rigidly cutting people off or refusing to engage. They are about creating a space where mutual respect, understanding, and care can flourish. When we establish boundaries, we allow ourselves to engage with others from a place of emotional strength and clarity, rather than from a place of depletion or resentment. The paradox lies in the fact that by setting limits, we are not withdrawing or shutting people out. We are actually opening the door to more genuine, meaningful interactions. When both people in a relationship are able to respect and honor each other's boundaries, they create a dynamic of trust, equality, and mutual care. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialist ideas shed light on the concept of personal boundaries from the standpoint of individual freedom. Sartre argued that human beings are condemned to freedom, meaning that we are responsible for defining ourselves and shaping our lives through our actions. This radical freedom comes with the responsibility to establish clear boundaries in our interactions with others. Sartre's notion of bad faith involves the refusal to confront the discomfort of establishing boundaries and instead living passively, allowing others to dictate our choices and actions. By embracing our freedom and responsibility, we take ownership of our lives and establish boundaries that honor our true selves, rather than living in a way that compromises our values for the sake of pleasing others. Boundaries are not only crucial in personal relationships, but also in the way we interact with the broader world. In a culture that constantly demands more of our time and energy through work, social media, and the expectations placed upon us by others, it is easy to lose sight of our own needs and desires. In fact, modern life often encourages us to overextend ourselves, to constantly give and perform without regard for our own limits. But the paradox here is that true success and fulfillment do not come from endless self-sacrifice, but from the ability to assert our own limits and prioritize our needs. By setting boundaries with the world, we make room for the things that truly matter to us, whether it's time for rest, creative pursuits, or meaningful connections. This idea of boundaries as a means of self-respect is echoed in the work of the psychologist and philosopher Rollo May. In his book, The Courage to Create, May writes that boundaries are essential for creativity and personal growth. He argues that in order to create anything meaningful, whether it's art, a relationship, or a career, we must be able to establish boundaries that protect our emotional and mental resources. Without boundaries, we are at the mercy of external demands, and our creativity and energy are siphoned off by the needs and expectations of others. By setting limits and honoring our own needs, we free ourselves to engage more fully with our creative potential and with the people and activities that bring us joy and fulfillment. At the same time, boundaries are also a reflection of how we define our worth. When we fail to set boundaries, we send a message to ourselves and to others that we do not value our time, energy, or well-being. Boundaries are not about rejecting others or refusing to help them. They are about protecting ourselves from being drained or manipulated by people who do not respect our limits. As the philosopher Epictetus, a Stoic thinker, reminds us, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Similarly, true emotional wealth comes not from constantly pleasing others or bending ourselves to their will, but from knowing what we need and being willing to protect that need. The paradox of boundaries is clear. In order to nurture our relationships, creativity, and sense of self, we must be willing to set limits. Far from isolating us, boundaries create the space for deeper, more authentic connections. By establishing clear boundaries, we honor both our own needs and the needs of others, allowing us to engage in relationships with greater clarity, respect, and strength. Boundaries, when set with wisdom and care, become the foundation for healthy, balanced, and fulfilling interactions. They are not walls that keep others out, but filters that allow the right people and experiences into our lives, fostering the conditions necessary for true growth, connection, and well-being. Part 9. The paradox of self-growth is often perceived as a linear process, an ongoing journey of self-improvement, where we strive to become better versions of ourselves through achievement, discipline, and mastery. The common notion is that growth involves adding more and more knowledge, more success, more skills. We're taught that progress is about reaching higher peaks, and that we must continually chase an ideal of perfection. However, the paradox of self-growth is that true growth is not about perfection. It is about embracing who we already are and deepening our understanding of ourselves. Growth is not the accumulation of external achievements, but the refinement and actualization of our inner selves. The process of self-growth, in its most profound sense, requires moving inward. Rather than focusing solely on external achievements, it involves getting in touch with our inner truth, exploring our desires, confronting our fears, and integrating our contradictions. The paradox lies in the fact that while we may strive for improvement, growth doesn't happen when we seek to fix ourselves. It happens when we accept and embrace our wholeness. Growth is not about becoming someone we are not, but about becoming who we truly are, shedding the layers of societal conditioning and self-doubt to reveal our authentic selves. The Greek philosopher Socrates, who is often considered the father of Western philosophy, put it simply, the unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates believed that self-growth comes not from external pursuits, but from introspection, reflecting on one's own thoughts, behaviors, and beliefs. By examining our lives, we come to know ourselves more deeply, and in doing so, we are able to grow. This introspective growth does not follow a linear trajectory. It is an ongoing, cyclical process of questioning, confronting, and refining. True growth is not about achieving perfection, but about engaging with our imperfections honestly and with curiosity. Socrates' call for self-examination emphasizes a paradox. In the pursuit of growth, we often need to step back from the pressure to improve and instead allow ourselves to simply be. We are not defined by our successes or failures, but by how we respond to both. This aligns with the teachings of the Stoic philosophers, who emphasize that growth comes not from external circumstances, but from mastering our inner world. As Marcus Aurelius, one of the most well-known Stoic thinkers, wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." For the Stoics, growth was about cultivating virtue qualities such as wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control, not through external achievements, but by constantly refining our inner character and mindset. This idea is further explored by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, whose work on the Übermensch, or overman, challenges conventional ideas of self-growth. Nietzsche argued that true self-growth comes from embracing life in all its raw intensity, including its struggles, contradictions, and uncertainties. He believed that growth involves breaking free from societal norms and discovering one's own values, passions, and purpose. Nietzsche's idea of becoming who you are suggests that growth is not about chasing a prescribed ideal, but about shedding the layers of conditioning and societal expectations that obscure our true nature. In this sense, the paradox of self-growth becomes clear. Growth is not about becoming someone else. It is about returning to yourself, embracing your own unique strengths, flaws, and potential. Nietzsche's perspective brings us to a crucial point. Growth is an ongoing, dynamic process. It is not a destination, but a continual journey of becoming. This understanding of growth stands in stark contrast to the typical narrative that emphasizes linear progress moving from one achievement to the next. Nietzsche saw growth as a constant, becoming, where each experience, each struggle, and each challenge contributes to the person we are in the process of becoming. It's in the messy, imperfect journey of growth that we uncover our true power and potential. Similarly, the philosopher Carl Jung's concept of individuation offers another crucial insight into the paradox of self-growth. Individuation, in Jungian terms, is the process of integrating all aspects of the self, including the unconscious and often repressed parts. This process involves confronting and accepting our shadow, the parts of ourselves that we deny or reject, and bringing them into conscious awareness. Jung argued that true self-growth requires the integration of these disparate aspects of the self, not the rejection of any part of our being. By accepting all parts of ourselves, even the ones we consider undesirable, we achieve wholeness and a deeper understanding of who we truly are. The paradox here is that self-growth involves not just adding new qualities or achieving external success, but accepting the parts of ourselves that we often seek to change or hide. Growth occurs when we embrace our imperfections, our vulnerabilities, and even our weaknesses. In Jungian terms, the more we embrace our shadow, the more we come into contact with our true selves, enabling us to grow in ways that are authentic and transformative. In modern psychology, the idea of self-actualization, popularized by Abraham Maslow, reflects a similar understanding of growth. Maslow's hierarchy of needs culminates in self-actualization, the realization of one's fullest potential. However, Maslow emphasized that self-actualization is not about achieving a perfect, static state, but about continual personal development, embracing change, and pursuing authentic goals that align with our true values. True self-actualization, according to Maslow, is about being in touch with our deepest desires and needs and living in accordance with those values rather than constantly striving for an external ideal. The paradox of self-growth is that it requires both effort and surrender. While we are encouraged to strive for improvement, true growth often happens when we stop focusing solely on external measures of success and instead turn inward. We grow not by forcing ourselves into an idealized version of ourselves, but by allowing ourselves to evolve authentically, guided by introspection, self-acceptance, and the courage to confront our contradictions. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once said, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." Self-growth is a process of understanding who we have been in order to make better choices in the present and future. It's about reflecting on our past, learning from it, and allowing it to inform our future actions. However, this understanding of self-growth is not about achieving perfection or moving in a straight line. It is about embracing our complexity and contradictions as we continue to grow into our fullest selves. Ultimately, the paradox of self-growth is that it is not a linear or external pursuit. It is a circular and inward journey. We do not grow by becoming something other than ourselves, but by becoming more fully who we already are, shedding the expectations of others and embracing our own potential. Growth, in this sense, is the process of evolving into the most authentic version of ourselves, not by adding more to our lives, but by embracing the fullness of our being. Conclusion: the journey toward becoming unforgettable is not about striving for a flawless image or chasing the external markers of success that society so often glorifies. Rather, it is about embracing the paradoxes of being human, recognizing that our imperfections, vulnerabilities, and contradictions are the very qualities that make us powerful and magnetic. The lessons of philosophy, from Socrates to Nietzsche, from Aristotle to Jung, teach us that true fulfillment and authenticity come not from perfection, but from self-acceptance, emotional depth, and the courage to be fully ourselves. The paradox of authenticity: we learn that embracing our true selves' flaws, weaknesses, and all is far more compelling than projecting a polished image. As Carl Jung's concept of individuation suggests, true growth comes from integrating every part of ourselves, including the aspects we often hide or reject. In this process of self-actualization, we realize that we are not striving to become someone else, but to return to our authentic self. In the same way, the paradox of vulnerability reveals that showing our authentic selves, with all our imperfections and fears, is often the gateway to deep, meaningful relationships. True connection is built not on the facade of perfection, but on the courage to expose our real, unguarded selves. The paradox of quiet strength teaches us that true power lies not in loud displays of dominance, but in the calm presence that comes from being at peace with who we are. Emotional depth, too, is a powerful yet often overlooked trait. Those who can feel deeply and express their emotions authentically possess a rare strength that is both magnetic and transformative. Similarly, the paradox of love and relationships shows us that love is not about neediness or dependence, but about choosing others from a place of wholeness, recognizing that we can only love fully when we love ourselves first. Finally, the paradox of self-growth teaches us that true growth is not about striving for an unattainable ideal of perfection, but about embracing our journey of becoming. We grow not by adding more to our lives, but by shedding the layers of societal expectations and self-doubt to reveal who we truly are. In embracing these paradoxes, we become not just better versions of ourselves, but unforgettable ones. The key to living an authentic and impactful life lies not in perfecting an image, but in fully embracing and expressing the unique, real, and whole person that we are. When we stop seeking permission to be powerful and start living our truth unapologetically, we step into the fullness of our potential, and it is this authenticity that makes us unforgettable.